In a small village nestled between towering hills and an ancient forest, there lived an apothecary known to all as Thaddeus. His shop was a quaint little stone building tucked at the edge of the town square, its wooden signs swinging gently with the breeze. Thaddeus's Remedies and Wonders, it read, with ivy curling around the letters like an old vine. The smell of herbs, honey, and warm spices spilled out every time the door opened, comforting the weighty traveler or the worried villager. But there was more to Thaddeus than met the eye. The villagers came to him for remedies when they were ill, for potions to help with sleep or alertness, and sometimes even for simple herbs that could ease their aches. But there was an unspoken respect for him that was not just because of his skills as an apothecary. The villagers whispered that Thaddeus was no ordinary healer. He had a deep connection to the forest and its secrets, one that no one fully understood but that many feared. Thaddeus was a tall man, with silver-streaked hair and a beard that grew in thick, unruly curls. His eyes were a deep green, the color of moss after a spring rain, and there was a glint in them that suggested a knowledge of things most people couldn't fathom. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was with authority, as if each sentence carried the weight of years, or perhaps centuries, of wisdom. His store was a reflection of his enigmatic nature. It was filled with shelves of glass bottles, jars of dried herbs, bundles of twigs and flowers, and old books whose pages had turned yellow with age. In the corner of the room, a small fire crackled in a hearth, and a kettle hung above it, filling the air with the soothing scent of tea. One evening, a young woman named Ilara ventured into the shop. She was dressed in a simple cloak, her hair tied back with a plain ribbon. Her cheeks were pale, and her eyes seemed clouded with worry. She had heard whispers about Thaddeus's abilities, and though she was skeptical, she had no other choice but to seek his help. Her father, a strong man who worked as a blacksmith, had fallen ill with a mysterious fever that no one could seem to cure. She had tried every remedy from the village healers, but nothing had worked. Her father's condition only worsened, and the villagers told her that the fever was unlike any they had seen before, as if it were being drawn from some dark magic. With a deep breath, Ilara stepped into the apothecary's shop, the bell above the door jingling softly as she entered. Thaddeus was standing behind his counter, carefully grinding dried lavender with a mortar and pestle. He looked up as she entered, his sharp green eyes taking in her worried expression. "Can I help you, child?" he asked in a voice as smooth as velvet. Ilara hesitated, unsure of how to ask for help. "I've heard you can cure many things, even things that the others cannot. My father, he's ill. No one knows what's wrong with him. I was told you might know." Thaddeus set down the pestle and motioned for her to approach. "Tell me about your father," he said, his tone calm and reassuring. "He's a blacksmith," Ilara began, her voice trembling slightly. "Strong, healthy, always worked hard. But 2 days ago, he began to feel weak, and then a fever took hold of him. His skin is burning hot to the touch, and he cannot keep any food down. The fever has not broken, and no herbs or potions have helped." Thaddeus nodded, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "A curse," he murmured. "There are many forms of magic in this world, some of it ancient and dark, and some of it born from the forest itself. It is not unusual for such things to seek out the strong, the ones with a deep connection to the earth. Your father may be more deeply tied to the land than you realize." Ilara was startled. "You think someone cursed him?" "I do not know," Thaddeus replied, his voice distant, as though he was contemplating something far beyond the realm of simple illness. but I do know that magic has a way of finding those who are most vulnerable. If there is a curse at work, there is only one way to break it." Thaddeus's eyes glinted with a hidden knowledge, and he motioned to a door at the back of the shop. "Follow me," he said. Ilara followed him into the small, dimly lit room where shelves lined the walls holding jars of strange ingredients. There were roots, feathers, crystals, and glass bottles filled with glowing liquids. Thaddeus approached a large wooden chest in the corner, unlocking it with a creak. He withdrew a small bundle wrapped in velvet, and when he opened it, Ilara gasped. Inside was an ancient-looking book, its cover worn and cracked with age. The pages were filled with strange symbols and illustrations of plants, animals, and mysterious creatures that Ilara had never seen before. Thaddeus carefully flipped through the pages, his finger tracing the ink as he searched for something. "This book was passed down to me by my master, a healer who lived many lifetimes ago," Thaddeus explained. "Within it are the secrets of the earth, the magic of nature, and the forgotten rituals that bind all things together. If your father is cursed, we must follow the old ways to find the root of it." Ilara watched as he found the page he was searching for and placed the book before her. The page depicted a symbol she recognized, an ancient rune of the forest, a circle intertwined with thorns. It was a symbol said to represent a pact between the earth and those who walked upon it. "This symbol," Thaddeus said, pointing to the drawing, "was used by the ancient druids to create a barrier between the natural world and the magical forces that lurk in the shadows. To break a curse, we must perform a ritual under the light of the full moon, using the herbs and ingredients that grow in the forest." Ilara felt a sense of dread rise in her chest. "A ritual? But how can we trust this?" Thaddeus's gaze softened, and he placed a hand on his shoulder. "Magic, both dark and light, is a part of the world. It can heal or harm, depending on how it is wielded. The forest has its own spirit, and those who understand its language can commune with it to heal what is broken." Rye by a slightly larger vial presented itself to the two and was passed from hand to hand until finally one shiny green eye, abundantly brighter than the dead of night, a handful of dried herbs, and a crystal vial of moonlit dew. He placed them into a small wooden bowl, and together they ventured into the forest. As the moon rose high in the sky, casting its pale light over the treetops, Thaddeus and Ilara stood in a clearing, the air heavy with the scent of pine and earth. Thaddeus placed the bowl before a stone altar and began to chant in a language that Ilara could not understand. The wind picked up, swirling around them as though answering his call. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the earth itself seemed to awaken, and Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. She had never felt anything like this before, the sense that something ancient and powerful was at work. Then, as if on cue, a soft light began to glow from the bowl, illuminating the clearing. Ilara could feel the presence of something otherworldly watching over them, its gaze both protective and predatory. The air became thick with the scent of the forest, and she saw the shadow of a figure move among the trees, an ethereal shape, fleeting but powerful. Suddenly, the light from the bowl flared, and a sharp cry echoed through the forest. Ilara flinched, her breath caught in her throat. Thaddeus smiled, his eyes filled with a knowing sadness. "It is done. The curse has been lifted." When Ilara returned to her father's side, she found him sitting up in bed, his face flushed with the color of health. The fever had broken, and his body was no longer burning with unnatural heat. He looked at her, bewildered, but smiled when he saw her. "What happened?" he asked weakly. Ilara only smiled, her heart swelling with relief. You're safe now, Father. You're home." The story of her father's recovery spread through the village, and the legend of Thaddeus, the apothecary who could heal the impossible, grew even stronger. But Elara knew the truth. Sometimes the most powerful magic was not one of destruction, but one of healing. And sometimes the greatest gifts were the secrets whispered by the earth itself. From that night on, Elara would often visit the apothecary not just for remedies, but for stories of magic, healing, and the ancient ways that Thaddeus had inherited from the forest. Together they would sit by the fire, and he would tell her tales of forgotten spells, of creatures that lived beyond the veil, and of the deep connection between all things. And as she grew, Elara understood that the world was full of wonders, both dark and light, and that magic was not something to fear, but something to respect and honor. The forest had its secrets, but so did the apothecary, and they were worth guarding, for they were the key to the healing of not just bodies, but souls.
Thank you. 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 Thank you.